All right, so I have today a PlayStation 3, the big one. I bought this for $15 plus like $12 in shipping or whatever. And the only reason I bought it is because it said neck token capacitors on the lid. Now, I think the only definitive way you can know, semi-definitive, is to read the SySCON and determine, based on the error code that you get back, whether or not the neck token capacitors are good or bad. Hopefully they are, and then we can replace them, and hopefully we'll have a working PS3. But first we'll verify the defect and make sure that this indeed does have the yellow light of death. So I'm going to turn on power. I get a red light. Pressing the power button does nothing. So right now, so the eject button works. Can I turn it on from a video game? Let's just slide this in here real quick. All right, so it cut on. And it's staying on, so let's switch. This has kind of derailed my the intention for this video. It was going to be, how can we figure out how to read the SySCON chip? But yeah, but now it's turned into, I don't have HDMI output. Let's try a different strategy. So what we'll do is we'll take our HDMI cable, we'll plug it into our HDMI to AV out. So I'm not saying that the neck token capacitors don't need to be changed, because I've had a console in the past that when I got it, I was like, dude, what's this dude talking about? Thing boots up fine. And then, like, the next time I went to boot it up, it gave me yellow light of death. So sometimes it can have to do with the console warming up. But let's plug in our, we're going to use our PS2 cable. And see if we can't just get some type of video output. So we'll plug this in. And we'll go switch the capture card back to, okay, yeah, this thing has no video output. That's bad. That's pretty bad. Because if I remember correctly, the video output, and of course it doesn't have a hard drive, so I wonder, you know what? Problem is the power button doesn't work, so I can't like do a reset on it. So we're gonna have to take this apart anyhow. It needs to be cleaned, obviously, but so yeah, so that's where we're at. So I will take I will disassemble this far enough to get to that power switch and see if I can't figure out why it doesn't work. All right. So this is what the bottom of the thing looks like. It's not supposed to look like that. It's absolutely not supposed to look like that. And so as you can see right down in here is how you turn it on. That's the eject. So let's plug it back in. Alright, this thing is dangerous. Alright, let's cut the power on. Wait for the red LED. All right, so now it turns on like it's supposed to. So I know I have another one of those top lids, I think. So I can replace that, simple enough. But all right, so let's we'll check for video out one more time. You know what? This cable may be bad. This cable may be bad. Let me grab another one just to make sure I'm not making this harder on myself. All right, so this, plug this in. Plug it back in my adapter. Let's switch over to scene 2. Yeah, no, so we don't have any video out. So let's see if we can cut it off now. All right, so it's off. So I'm going to take this hard drive. It's a 1 terabyte, or no, yeah, it's a 1 terabyte, but it reads as caution. And I don't have any screws for this thing. Let's I have a screw laying on my desk here. Let's see if that'll work. I don't think so. It's good enough to hold it in there, I think. All right, so we'll insert our hard drive. So if I hold down, I think it's power button, you got to hold it down like 3 times, right? So we're going to switch back over to the view. So let it beep 3 times, right? Oh no! And then when you boot it back up, it'll boot up in safe mode. I think that's the way that goes. I'm still not seeing anything. I'm still not seeing any video. All right, let's switch back over to HDMI. All right, I don't see anything. All right, let's turn it off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hook this up to my actual TV. Let's see if that makes any type of difference. All right, so it didn't make any difference at all plugging it into my actual TV. So I'm going to take that board out and have a look-see, and then I'll be back when I've got that done. All right, so let's inspect this HDMI port. And it's dirty, but it looks like it should work, you know. That's dirty as well. Let's squirt some alcohol in there. I don't know. That looks like it should work. And so the problem, let's switch back to the camera. So the problem is when you trace all these paths coming from the RSX, you can tell they all lead to either this HDMI encoder, or they head down to, I'm assuming, this chip, which my guess would be is for your AV output. So with that being said, then if you're missing video on both, then it would seem to me that the RSX is not outputting video. That's what it seems to me. And so obviously I'm not going to be replacing an RSX. It's missing its CMOS battery as well. And maybe some of the stuff's bad. Let's look under the microscope and see if we can see anything. Suppose we'll do our due diligence and I need to stop hitting the microscope with my big hands. I mean, I would think, though, that you wouldn't necessarily require a CMOS to boot the console up, because that CMOS most likely goes to the south bridge. But if I applied power to the console, then you would think then that it would just default to whatever time. But you know, I don't know for certain how that works. So let's I guess let's check some of these filters. So I guess we'll check these fuses, or these diodes. So one way, you can see the little stripe. Let me see if I can. There's a stripe on the right side of these. So if I put my black probe on that white stripe, I should read 0.6 or so, and I do. If I switch the leads and put my black probe on the what they call the anode, it'll be open or nothing. 2.9 it says. So that's good. And this one says 1.2. Nope, it says 0.7. We'll switch the probes just to be thorough. 2.6, that's good. Nothing, that's good. And that's good. So, I guess I could check for shorted caps. Yeah, this is not looking good. So, unless we have shorts around the RSX. Do you see what I'm saying though? If you look at this board, you see lines. You see lines coming out, right? You see traces coming out. And they go to this chip. And that's the encoder for your HDMI port. But then you also see different lines that go out to this. And then you have all these filtering caps that filter the signal. So, not to say it couldn't happen, but it would be illogical to conclude that, oh, well, I have both bad, something bad in my AV side and something bad in my HDMI side. To me, it seems illogical to conclude that, because they both tie back to the RSX. And since the RSX is responsible for providing video, it's an issue. And the other part of it is, if the RSX wasn't booting up, then the console wouldn't boot it. You'd get a yellow light of death, or you would get some other error. So maybe we still will see if we're getting any errors in this case. But yeah, I don't know. So let me do some research, and then I don't see anything wrong with the HDMI circuit for sure. I don't imagine these capacitors are bad. I mean, why would they go bad? You know, there's no shorts around. It's 84 ohms. Not sure what a normal reading would be. 84 ohms. $10 ohms. I mean, measuring before, I remember measuring. We don't have any shorts on our voltage rails. These two would be for the CPU. These two, I'm assuming, would be for your RSX. I mean, I suppose it's a case of not getting enough, maybe not getting enough voltage to the RSX or something like that. But again, I mean, that's grasping for straws. I think it is booting up because I see the USB start to flash. Maybe cleaning the port and putting the new CMOS battery in there will help out. So when I have something to share, I will be back. All right, so here's the deal. I don't think this thing is fully booting up. I plugged the controller in and tried to get it to connect via USB, and it would not. And I know that controller works. I just used it not long ago. So that's the thing. I don't think it's fully booting up. And earlier, off camera, I went to cut it on, and it did give me the yellow light of death. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disassemble this far enough to hook up the SySCON, and then I'll explain what I'm doing and why I'm doing what I'm doing. But I got to get there first. I'll be back. All right, so this is going to be take 2 of the how to connect to your PS3 using SySCON, since I messed up the first one. So the first thing is you have to install Python. All right, so we need to install Python. So essentially what we do is we go to the Python website and we do a Google search for Python. And then we look up Python 2.7.1.8 or 2.7.18. And then you go ahead and download the appropriate one. I downloaded the x86 64 MSI installer. And then I went in and to my downloads and I installed that file. So I'm going to double click on the Python install package. I'm going to install it for all users. I'm going to go ahead and install it in my C drive. And it says I've already done all this, so it's already in there, or it's still in there from the previous time. I'm going to select next. I'm going to go down, and it says add python.exe to path. So this is basically your environment variable that you have to install. If you do it here, you can run Python from any directory and not just a Python directory. So I'm going to tell it will be installed on local hard drive. So I'm going to select next, and then we'll just wait for it to install those files. All right, so finished. We're going to select finish. All right, so the next thing that we need to talk about is the device that you're going to be using to read your SySCON chip. And if you don't know, I'll show you where the SySCON chip is at. So the SySCON chip is located right here. And so there are two types of SySCON chips. There's the Sherwood, I believe, and I can't read it, not this way. The Sherwood, for example, mine says SW-301. So that's how I know that I have a Sherwood. If you don't have a Sherwood, then you most likely have the other type. And that's going to make a difference when we actually get into the JavaScript, which we'll get to in a little bit. So the next thing is this device right here. This is your USB to, I'm assuming, RS-32. This is the type that I bought. It's a FT232RL. That's the name of the chip. So you have to buy one of these. And it's basically a USB connection. As you can see, one of the, I'm not sure what type of USB that is. Focus, bro. Focus. Anyhow, it's clear enough for you to see. But you need to buy one of those. And then you need to buy something to plug on the end of it to so that you can connect it to your PS3 motherboard. And it comes with this jumper. And you just ensure the jumper's set like I have it here. The last two pins there. So you need to, then we'll go back into Java. We've already installed our Java. So let's switch back over. So now we need to run our command prompt. And we have to download a couple of things that we're going to be using. And to do that, you just type in CMD and you press enter. And that'll take you to your command prompt. So we're going to be downloading a couple of extra scripts that the JavaScript that the gentleman by the name of Paco created. So one of those is going to be pip install py cryptodome. We're going to have to download that, and that takes a minute or so to download. All right, so that's done. And then we have to download the pip install py serial. And that, I'm assuming, is going to allow you to connect your USB port to the serial port on the PS3. So we'll go ahead and download and install that. All right, that's done. So now we should be able to verify that those things are installed correctly by typing the command python. And then what we'll do is I have my stuff arranged in a folder. I downloaded this from a channel called NSC Mods. He was very helpful. That's how I learned how to do this, was following his tutorial. And I'm going to drag that over. And then I have to identify the COM port that my RS-232 connection is going to be on. So to do that, we just basically, when we plug this in, we're plugging this into USB. Is it this way? No, it's the other way. We're plugging this into a USB port on our computer. So when one end of this is connected to here, the other end is connected to a USB port on my computer. So that's going to come up in a COM port on my computer. So the way we find that is we go to our device manager. And do I know how to get to the device manager from this? Maybe hardware and sound, device manager. And we will look for our USB serial port under ports COM and LPT. And so notice mine came up as COM3. Yours may come up as something different, but mine came up as COM3. So that's the next command I'm going to add in here. I'm going to do space, and then all caps. I don't know if it has to be all caps, but I always do it all caps. And then I would type in the revision or the SySCON chip that I had. So let's just say for me, it's going to be SW for Sherwood. So I'm going to press enter. And it's going to sit there. And then you get that greater than symbol. And at this point, the next command I would type would be AUTH for authenticate. And I would press enter. And it's going to give me an auth1 response invalid. So it's telling me, bro, we can't authorize with the SySCON chip. And that's because I have not yet soldered my wires to my motherboard. So I'm going to show you how to figure out that. The first thing you need to identify is which motherboard you have. So I have some pictures that you can get from PS3 Dev Wiki. This information is all over the internet. Where are diagram pics? Here we go. So I'll open that folder, and I have a VER001 motherboard. So if I double click on that image, it comes up and it tells me, okay, so your receive or transmit are here and here, and it's basically saying it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which one you use them as. One's going to be receive, one's going to be transmit. However, you'll find that when you solder your wires on there and you go to authenticate, it'll be like, nah, man, you're not authenticating. So then you have to switch the wires to make it work sometimes. And then you have a ground wire. So we'll go ahead and find that on my motherboard here. So notice my points, I'm going to try to get in close here, are located. My transmit and receiver are going to be located here and here. So I'm going to solder one wire here, another wire here, and then my ground wire I'll just attach to this ground leg of this connector right here. So we'll go ahead and knock that out and cut on the solder guy, which I should have had that on already. So I know by doing this previously that my receive wire works best on this leg here, and my transmit wire works best on this leg here. Just solder them on just like that, and then I can just attach my ground wire to there. So now I'm all hooked up, and just for your knowledge, it tells you which wire is which. You'll notice that one pin that my white wire is plugged into is the receive, and the one next to it is transmit. That's how I know which ones are receive and transmit. It's important to note that you have to have your power supply connected. So essentially what I'm going to do is plug in my power supply, and then I'm not going to plug in my 12 volt rail. I can, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to leave it propped up, and then I'm just going to plug in to ensure that I get my 5 volts, like so. That's all I need, is I need my 5 volts. So now I'll switch on power, and you'll see my red LED come on. So now we're ready to read the SySCON. Things we've done: we've installed Python. We figured out which version of motherboard we have. We know where our points are at. We soldered our wires to those points, and we've plugged in our 5 volts coming from the power supply. So now we're ready to authenticate with our SySCON chip. So to do that, we have to switch back over to the computer. So now, when you type things in command prompt, you don't have to type them all over again. You can just hit the up arrow, and it'll type it all again for you. So again, we have Python, our file that we dragged and dropped in there, and then COM3 and then SW. So we'll hit enter, and then we'll up arrow again until we get to auth. We'll hit enter, and it says the response is invalid. It might say that a couple of times. So I did it again, and this time it worked. So now to get my errors, I'm going to type in the command error log get 00. So that's the first log, is get 00. I'll hit enter, and it'll come back with a code. So initially when I recorded this, I had two codes. I had a 1002 and I had a 2124. So to figure out what those codes mean, you can go to your SySCON error codes on the PS3 dev wiki site, and it'll tell you exactly what all those codes mean. So for example, I had a 1002, which is power to my RSX. So that should clue you in right there that the RSX is not getting the appropriate amount of power. So that should also cue you in that you need to replace your neck token capacitors, which we did, and I'll have footage of that. I changed those out, and I put my capacitors in here. The other code it gives us, the other code that it gives us is 2124. So if we look at that code, it's located here, and it says AV, audio video. And as you remember, this console is not outputting any video at all. So that kind of makes sense. The question then becomes, what's causing the error? So again, that's where we're at. That is an explanation of how I connect it to the SySCON and how I read the SySCON. If we wanted to go a little bit further with it, let's go back to it. I will connect fully the power supply, and now I'll be able to actually turn this console all the way on. And then we'll see what the error log says after we do that. All right, so I'll go ahead and cut on power. I'll hold it down here in the center to keep it cool. We'll switch back, go back to our command prompt. So as you can see, the console's booting up. So I'm going to hit error get log 00, and it tells me it's in a power on state. So that's good. That means it powered on, right? So once I read that power on state, then when I click my next error, it tells me, okay, it's powered on, but you're getting the 2124 error. So with that being said, we'll kind of go through the video, and I'll show you everything that I've done. All right, I forgot to record, but all I've done so far is basically rip off the those Technokin capacitors. I just ripped them off. I don't have a hot plate, so I can't desolder them very well. So I'm just going to flux down on all this, add some fresh solder, and then try to peel the pieces of metal that are still there. I'm going to try to peel those off with some So basically, these capacitors, and these are 330 microfarad that I pulled off of something that I had laying around. So we're essentially going to connect, because I'm pretty sure, let's verify. Let's break out the multimeter. I think the bottom trace is ground, and the top trace is, yeah. So basically the orientation of these capacitors, I'm not sure on these if the positive is with the stripe. I think that it is. So I would essentially be putting them on there like this. And I need 2 per. I need 2 per like that. And I say that because, like, if you look at this one, this is a 470 microfarad, and I'm gonna mix and match. I don't really care. I don't think it'll hurt nothing. I pulled some of these off of a motherboard that I had. So basically, this will be down here like this. You know, I didn't check that actual. To make sure, yeah, that's ground. That's ground, that's ground, that's ground, the other one's ground. Okay. I'd like to use, I think that I'll use all my 470s. So if I match all of these up, so basically it would, I'll put these like this, connected to that top, and these I'll have like this. Alright, so let's see if that's sufficient to place these. I think so. I think so. So let's put a little flux down. So what I'm hoping is that since both the audio and video, or the HDMI and the AV port, were both not outputting video, what I'm hoping is that the voltage consumption required by the RSX was more than those capacitors could support, and so the console never fully started. Therefore, it wouldn't obviously output video. But we will check now to see if the console starts fully. Even if it doesn't output video, I can use the controller to determine. And as always, it's my luck. I'll do all of this, and the DVD drive will be bad. That's how it works for me every time. All right. So we'll plug in power and see if anything blows up. We got a red light. Let's plug in the HDMI cable. We're going to pay attention to the red light. Okay, it didn't cut off, so we didn't make anything worse. Still don't have video. I mean, it detects it, obviously. Now I got to hold for 4 beeps. And that should get me in the safe mode, and it does not. Yep, still nothing. Alrighty. You know what? Let's now see if my controller connects. So it's still not booted. I don't think, anyways. Alrighty, back to the drawing board. Alright, so an interesting find. I removed the HDMI encoder, and now I get a 2124 and a 2024. So it almost seems as if the 2024 is for the HDMI encoder, and the 2124 is for the other chip, the AV out chip. So what I'll do is I'll replace the HDMI encoder and then remove the AV encoder. So yeah, I mean, would that 2124 stop it from booting though? That's the real question. Anyhow, so I'm going to do that real quick. Alright, so to recap where we're at, I pulled off the HDMI port. I have replaced the NEC token, so I no longer get the 1002 error, so I'm not getting that quintessential you need to replace your capacitors around the RSX error code anymore. So that's cleared. Now the second fault with this device is I was getting the alpha 2124. So I pulled off the HDMI encoder, and then I started getting the alpha 2024. Okay, yeah, I don't know if I know how this window capture thing works, but anyhow, so when we change the NEC tokens, we're no longer getting that 1002 error. So I pulled off the HDMI encoder, and we started getting the 2024 error. So then I put the HDMI encoder back, and we were still getting the 2124 error. So I put the HDMI encoder back on, and then the last two boots, as you can see, I'm back to the 2124. So I'm assuming that is the AV encoder. So I had another board, so it's not the exact same, it doesn't say the exact same thing on the chip, but we are going to, I've already pulled the one off of this board, and that's another piece of the puzzle. I pulled the AV encoder off of this board, and I was still only getting the alpha 2124, or the 2124 error. So I pulled an AV encoder off of another board, and I'm getting ready to solder that on here. So normally what I do, because I'm the worst solderer of all time, is I'll tack this in place, and then I'll come back with the hot air on each side of that chip and press down. So all right, here we go. We got a red light. Nope, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Alright, so I got this joker all took apart so that I can power it on. And I was watching underneath the thermal cam. This little cheap thermal cam I got. This little doohickey right here. This thing is not okay, bro. I mean, it just feels cheap. But anyhow, it's like 100 and... Should have just got one of those ones you plug into your phone, but I didn't. I opted to go with that. But anyhow, the only thing that I see really getting like hotter than everything else, other than the RSX and the CPU, is that one chip right there, 4654, and the other one doesn't get hot at all. So I'm not sure if they're in parallel. It looks like. So if they're in parallel, then that means that both of those are doing something in tandem. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if I should replace those, or I can't really see the. I mean, I saw the HDMI encoder getting warm, and when I have it all put together with the SySCON reader, it says it powers up successful. That's the first thing I get when I type error get or error log get or whatever 00. It tells me that it booted up successfully. But then after that, it gives me that 2124 error. So yeah, I don't know. I'm telling you, it's almost like the RSX is not fully booting. It's not that the HDMI or the AV chip aren't doing whatever. It's almost as if the RSX or the system doesn't fully boot, because the light for the light for the hard drive flashes once, but my controllers never connect. And so if it was booted fully, then at least, and I just wasn't getting video, then at least my controller would connect, you know. But it doesn't. It doesn't connect at all. So I don't know what that's all about. But yeah, that's the only thing that seems to be getting like hotter than everything else is that one chip we looked at under the microscope, which is this chip right here. And all of these are like, I don't know, I know that these are power circuits for something. I just don't know what they're power circuits for. Because these are all the power rails back here for your RSX and your CPU. And since we've replaced the NEC tokens, you know, we're getting a solid 1.2 volts on all of the capacitors going into the RSX. So we know it's getting voltage. But that communication, I mean, it might be working enough to pass the power on self-test, which is what the SySCON checks, but it may not be working enough to fully start, unless it's a RAM issue. But I don't know. Looks like all of the RAM is tied to the CPU. I don't see the RSX having any specific RAM that belongs to it. I'm quite perplexed. Quite perplexed indeed. Well, I think that's the end of the road, man. I've tried everything. Literally everything. So, to recap what we've done, is we connected to the SySCON. We got the error codes. We fixed the NEC token. We fixed the RSX not getting enough voltage because the capacitors had degraded. It is now getting enough voltage. That error went away. We're still getting a persistent 2124 error, which PSDev Wiki says is related to the AV. So I changed the HDMI port, or as you were, I removed the HDMI encoder. I still had the 2124 error, and then I started getting a 2024 error. When I put the HDMI port back on, that 2024 error went away, but I still had the 2124. So I changed the AV encoder. It did not work. The error still persisted. I did change those two MOSFETs that looked like they were getting hot. Made no change. Still can't see anything. I've checked every fuse. I've went through both the AV circuits and the HDMI circuits. I went through the RSX, probing from ground to different places around the RSX, and nothing comes up shorted. So, I mean, I think the problem is common. It's a common problem. You know, if your HDMI encoder was bad, the AV encoder would still work. You know, it's not as if your RSX isn't going to output video to the AV encoder just because your HDMI encoder is bad. I had a PS3 a while back that HDMI wouldn't work, but the AV port worked perfectly. So I think the problem is the RSX. I think that's ultimately what's wrong with this console. I don't know specifically what. You know, everybody will say, oh, it's cracked solder joints, whatever the case may be. I don't know. I don't know whether it is or it didn't. It might have just went bad, you know. So yeah, so I don't know, man. I don't know. I think I have tried my very hardest to fix this, but I don't think I can. So anyhow, hopefully you learned something, and I appreciate you watching. Thanks.